I still remember the chilly autumn evening when everything in my seemingly ordinary life took an unexpected turn. I had just come home after a long day at the firm, my mind filled with the usual clutter of deadlines and boardroom negotiations. The sky outside was a deep navy and the streetlights cast long, eerie shadows on our quiet suburban street. As I stepped inside our house, I noticed something peculiar. There was a faint, almost imperceptible hum emanating from our study, even though I was sure I had turned off the computer before leaving that morning. Lucy, my wife of 8 years, was sitting in the living room, absorbed in her laptop. Her usual warm smile was missing, replaced by a focused, almost distracted expression. "Hey, Lucy," I greeted casually, hanging my coat on the rack. "How was your day?" She looked up for a moment, blinking as if pulled out of a deep thought, and then replied with a light laugh, "Oh, you know, the usual." It was a response that carried none of her usual enthusiasm, yet I couldn't quite place the reason for my sudden unease. After a quick dinner that night, I retired to my study with a restless mind. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. While scrolling through some emails on my phone, I noticed an unread message with an unfamiliar sender. The subject simply read, "Update." It wasn't the kind of email Lucy usually received. Her correspondence was typically mundane: bills, work memos, and the occasional online shopping receipt. Curiosity got the better of me, and I opened the email. Instead of a message, I was met with a string of encrypted characters and an attachment that I didn't immediately recognize. I made a mental note to look into it later, not wanting to disturb Lucy or create any unnecessary alarm. The next morning, I decided to revisit the computer in our study before Lucy woke up. The system logs still showed signs of activity from the previous night, a series of brief spikes in network traffic that I couldn't explain. I spent a few minutes scanning through the files and browsing history, looking for any clues that might suggest why our network had been unusually active. Nothing definitive surfaced, just the usual digital remnants of a busy workday and a few unscheduled logins that I attributed to software updates or background processes. Still, an undercurrent of doubt began to form in my mind. At work, my colleagues mentioned that there had been minor disturbances in our firm's network security over the past few days. It was nothing alarming, a few isolated incidents that the IT department quickly managed, but it was enough to set off my internal alarm. I found myself glancing at my phone more frequently, wondering if that mysterious email was somehow related. The thought nagged at me: what if someone had managed to breach her home network? What if Lucy's casual reference to an IT consultant friend from a cybersecurity forum wasn't as innocent as it seemed? Throughout the day, I couldn't focus properly on my tasks. Every time my phone buzzed, I expected another cryptic message or a notification that would further deepen the mystery. I even caught myself mentally replaying the sound of that persistent hum from the study, a sound that now symbolized a secret I wasn't meant to uncover. That evening, after another seemingly routine dinner with Lucy, I found myself alone in the study once more. I decided it was time to delve deeper into the unexplained network logs and the encrypted email. Sitting in front of the computer, I opened a series of diagnostic tools that I previously read about online. As I navigated through the maze of system data, I discovered several instances of data being sent to unfamiliar IP addresses during late-night hours. The timestamps coincided exactly with when Lucy claimed she was asleep. A cold shiver ran down my spine as I saved these logs onto an external drive. I tried to convince myself that it was just a technical glitch, a misconfigured device, or a harmless error in the system. But deep down, I couldn't shake the unsettling feeling that something more deliberate was happening. I decided to keep this information to myself for the time being, hoping that it would all turn out to be nothing more than an anomaly. Later that night, as I lay in bed listening to the quiet hum of the refrigerator and the distant sounds of the neighborhood, my thoughts kept returning to Lucy's behavior. Over the past few weeks, she had grown increasingly secretive. She'd taken calls in hushed tones and stepped away from the room whenever I entered. When I asked her about it, she would wave it off with a smile and claim it was nothing, just routine work calls with a friend she'd met online. Her friend, as she mentioned in passing, was involved in cybersecurity, a field she admired for its technical prowess. I had no reason to doubt her. After all, Lucy was a smart woman with her own career, and I trusted her implicitly. And yet, there was an undeniable disconnect between her reassurances and the inexplicable activity in our digital life. The encrypted email, the mysterious network spikes, and Lucy's evasive behavior all coalesced into a puzzle that was rapidly taking shape. I was determined to find the missing pieces, but I also knew that any premature confrontation could shatter the fragile calm of our marriage. I resolved to gather more evidence, to document every anomaly, and to wait for the right moment to seek answers. Before closing my eyes that night, I backed up every relevant file and saved copies of all the unusual logs. I also took screenshots of the encrypted email, preserving it as a digital testament to the events of that day. I promised myself that I would come back to it all with a clear head and a logical plan, rather than letting my emotions cloud my judgment. As sleep finally claimed me, I couldn't help but wonder if this was merely the beginning of a much larger and more intricate web of secrets. The night was silent except for the soft ticking of the clock on the wall, marking each second of a moment that seemed to stretch into eternity. In that silence, I vowed to uncover the truth behind the digital disturbances and the growing mystery of Lucy's strange new world. Unbeknownst to me, the seeds of betrayal had already been sown, and the coming days would reveal a reality far more complex than I could have ever imagined. When I awoke the next morning, the crisp light of dawn filtered through the blinds, and the house seemed untouched by the dark events of the night before. Lucy was already up, humming softly in the kitchen as she prepared breakfast. I forced a smile, masking the storm of doubts that raged silently within me. Over coffee and toast, I listened to her recount trivial details of her day, careful not to let on that my mind was elsewhere. Yet, beneath the surface of everyday life, a quiet storm was brewing, a storm that would soon shatter the calm of our familiar existence and force me to confront a betrayal that was as unexpected as it was profound. For now, all I could do was wait, observe, and record every small detail, knowing that the truth, no matter how deeply hidden, had a way of emerging in the most unforeseen moments. The days following that unsettling night blurred together in a series of routine actions and discreet investigations. I made it a habit to check our home network logs every evening after Lucy went to bed. Each session at the computer was a meticulous process of sifting through data entries, tracking down any unusual activity. The first part of the mystery had been unsettling enough, but nothing could have prepared me for the evidence that began to accumulate. One evening, while reviewing the router logs, I noticed an unusual surge in outbound traffic around 2 a.m., a time when I knew Lucy was sound asleep. The data packets were being transmitted to several IP addresses that did not match any known contacts or services. I bookmarked these entries, saving screenshots and noting down the timestamps with precision. The technical details were clear: someone had established a remote connection to our network. But the question remained, who was behind it? I decided to run a trace on the unknown IP addresses. The results led me to obscure server names and locations that I hadn't encountered before. I cross-referenced the data with public IP registries, but the trail went cold quickly. One username, however, continued to surface in the logs, a username I had come across earlier in an encrypted file, Darknet Ryan. The name seemed to hint at a connection to underground cyber activity. I filed this away as an important piece of the puzzle. During the day, Lucy carried on with her schedule, leaving little time for casual conversation. I made a point to observe her behavior more closely. Every morning, she would leave for work with her phone in hand, her eyes scanning the screen with a familiarity that I couldn't quite understand. At times, she would step out into the hallway to take a call, always speaking in clipped, hushed tones. I listened from a distance, picking up only fragments of conversation that referenced urgent updates and secure channels. I wasn't one to jump to conclusions, so I continued to document every occurrence, determined to let the facts speak for themselves. At work, I overheard colleagues discussing a minor incident involving data breaches at a partner company. Although it was dismissed as a random cyber event, the conversation made me wonder if similar techniques were being employed in our own home. I took a note on my phone, cross-referencing technical terms and file names from the incident with those in our network logs. One technical term kept cropping up: encrypted relay. It wasn't part of our normal network activity, and it suggested a deliberate effort to obfuscate the data transmission path. The presence of this relay was another clue that something was orchestrated behind the scenes. As the week progressed, the evidence became harder to ignore. I began using software to monitor our network continuously, setting alerts for any activity that deviated from the norm. Each alert was another piece of data to be logged and archived. There were moments of quiet satisfaction as I watched the software capture data in real time, an intricate digital map of every packet that traveled through our system. Yet, with every new alert, the mystery deepened. The appearance of Darknet Ryan was no longer an isolated incident, it was a recurring pattern that pointed to a hidden connection. At home, the tension was growing. Lucy maintained her calm, handling her daily routines without a hint of disruption. She managed the household, prepared meals, and maintained her schedule with the precision of someone who was fully in control. In the evenings, though, when the lights dimmed and the house quieted, there was a palpable shift. Lucy's phone would buzz incessantly and she would exchange rapid, almost coded messages. I couldn't help but wonder if her communications were related to the network anomalies I was uncovering. One rainy Thursday night, I returned to the study after ensuring Lucy was in bed. I booted up the computer and began my nightly review of the network logs. That night, a new pattern emerged, multiple small data transfers that coincided with incoming texts on my own phone, texts I had dismissed earlier as spam or misdirected alerts. This time, however, the messages were interspersed with numerical sequences that seemed to match fragments of the encrypted emails I'd seen. The coincidences were too consistent to ignore. I documented everything meticulously. I set up a detailed spreadsheet with timestamps, data sizes, and source information for each irregular activity. Every entry was a marker, a breadcrumb that I hoped would eventually lead to a clearer picture of what was happening behind the scenes. I reached out to a former colleague with a background in network security, keeping the inquiry strictly technical. The conversation was brief, with him confirming that the technical signatures I described were consistent with unauthorized remote access techniques that were often employed by skilled hackers operating in the dark net. His confirmation, delivered in matter-of-fact terms, only underscored the seriousness of the situation. Despite the mounting technical evidence, I had yet to confront Lucy directly. I was cautious. I knew that a premature confrontation could shatter the calm of our home life and possibly destroy any remaining trust between us. Instead, I continued to operate under a veneer of normalcy, letting my investigation run quietly in parallel to our everyday routines. I even started to use encrypted messaging apps on my own phone to communicate with my network security friend, ensuring that any technical advice I received was secure and discreet. One afternoon, I noticed Lucy returning home later than usual. Her car, parked in the driveway, bore the slightest mark of an unfamiliar trip, a smear of rain on the side that did not match our local weather patterns. I asked her about her day, keeping my tone neutral and casual. I had to meet someone about a new project, she said, her eyes darting briefly to the kitchen before returning to the living room. There was nothing overt in her explanation, yet the ease with which she mentioned it didn't match the sense of urgency I had come to expect from such encounters. That night, I decided to back up all the suspicious files and logs onto a secure drive. I made sure every screenshot, every timestamped entry, and every piece of fragmented data was stored safely, as though they were pieces of evidence in a case I was determined to solve. As I clicked save, the sound of the hard drive whirring in the quiet room served as a reminder of the silent war being waged in our digital domain. Every day after that, I observed a steady stream of alerts and logged data pointing to activity between unknown entities and our home network. There was an unmistakable rhythm to it, a systematic pattern that suggested deliberate planning. I compared notes between the entries and began forming a timeline. The timeline hinted at connections that extended beyond our household. The data transfers and cryptic messages pointed to a network of communication far larger than what I had initially imagined. Throughout these developments, I maintained my outward composure. Lucy continued to perform her role in our home with efficiency, all the while keeping her phone close and her manner reserved. I was left to piece together the fragments of evidence, each new log entry and numerical sequence bringing me closer to an unsettling truth. Yet, for all the technical details, one question remained unresolved: what was Lucy's role in this elaborate exchange? Before the week drew to a close, I decided to test the security of our own devices. I updated software, tightened network protocols, and even set up a firewall rule to block the IP addresses that had repeatedly shown up in the logs. These technical maneuvers provided some temporary reassurance, but the digital residue of past activity was not so easily erased. It was as if the network itself was whispering secrets of its own, a silent testament to actions hidden in the shadows of our seemingly secure home. That night, as I sat in the quiet study with the glow of multiple monitors casting long shadows across the room, I revisited the encrypted email once more. The code within it was a puzzle I had yet to solve, a string of numbers and letters that now seemed to hold the key to everything. I was particularly fixated on the recurring username, Darknet Ryan, which had become an ominous symbol in my investigation. What was his connection to Lucy? And how deep did this network intrusion run? With every piece of evidence logged and every anomaly documented, I felt both the weight of responsibility and the sting of betrayal. I was determined to find the truth, even if it meant unraveling the carefully constructed layers of secrecy that had crept into our lives. The evidence was mounting, and with it came an unspoken promise of revelations yet to come. Night after night, I pored over the data I'd meticulously collected. My once routine task of monitoring our network had transformed into a covert operation, and every unexplained data transfer felt like a coded message pointing to a betrayal I never wanted to face. It wasn't long before the details started to crystallize into an undeniable pattern. Late-night data spikes, cryptic messages, and the persistent appearance of Darknet Ryan in the logs formed a puzzle that I was slowly beginning to solve. I had reached a turning point when I uncovered a series of encrypted files hidden within the same folder I'd found before. They weren't just remnants of idle online chatter, they contained detailed logs of conversations complete with timestamps and file transfers. As I decrypted one of the smaller files with the help of my network security friend, the content revealed fragments of discussions that were disturbingly specific. The messages hinted at meetings, exchanges of money, and even references to a project code name that I'd never heard Lucy mention before. My mind raced as I read the technical details. The language was clinical and precise, void of any overt emotion. It was as if Lucy and this Ryan had been operating with the efficiency of seasoned professionals. Their conversations didn't delve into emotional territory, instead, they were marked by the unmistakable cadence of business transactions and covert operations. I saved every detail, every snippet of communication, and began constructing a timeline of their activities. The trail led from our home network to obscure corners of the darknet, a labyrinth of hidden servers and anonymized IP addresses where nothing was as it seemed. Despite the cold facts laid out before me, I felt a mounting pressure to confront the reality of what I was discovering. Each piece of evidence was a quiet, deliberate betrayal that had been meticulously hidden behind layers of encryption and digital camouflage. I recalled the evenings when Lucy would hastily end phone calls or leave a room mid-conversation. Now, I saw those moments in a stark new light, each a subtle clue to a secret she had kept well hidden. One evening, as the rain drummed steadily against the windows, I decided to take a different approach. Instead of silently documenting every irregularity, I began testing the boundaries of our digital security. I increased the logging on our system, creating a more detailed picture of the intrusions. I set alerts for every instance of access from the suspicious IP addresses and even monitored the specific file access on the computer. The increased scrutiny yielded immediate results. Within hours, a new encrypted message appeared in the system log, its timestamp aligning with a period when Lucy had claimed to be asleep. The contents of this message were more direct. It mentioned a meeting scheduled for the following week at a location that wasn't our usual area. There was also a reference to a secure drop for a data package. The clinical tone and precise scheduling left little room for doubt. Lucy was coordinating something far beyond a simple online consultation. Every new alert felt like a countdown to a confrontation I had been dreading. At work, the tension was palpable even in the mundane routine of office life. I found it increasingly difficult to focus on spreadsheets and conference calls, my mind constantly returning to the dark web of evidence I was uncovering at home. My network security friend confirmed that the techniques employed in these communications were sophisticated. This was not the work of an amateur hacker, but someone with deep connections in the underground world of cyber operations. The confirmation was a heavy blow, as it painted a picture of premeditation and deliberate concealment. I began to wonder how deeply Lucy was entangled in this clandestine network. Every encrypted file and coded message pointed to a level of involvement that went beyond mere curiosity or occasional correspondence. There were details about transactions, scheduled meetings, and even technical instructions for bypassing certain security protocols. This was no casual flirtation with the dark net. It was a full-scale operation, and Lucy was not just an observer. The evidence was mounting, and the realization was as cold and calculated as the data on my screen. The next day, while Lucy was at work, I reviewed the timeline I had constructed. The series of data transfers spanned several weeks and were interwoven with moments when Lucy was alone with her phone or computer. The meticulous nature of the logs left little room for coincidence. It was as if every interaction had been planned down to the minute. I cross-referenced these moments with her daily schedule, her work meetings, lunch breaks, even her brief trips to the mailbox. The alignment was uncanny. Each anomaly coincided with a window of opportunity when Lucy could have been communicating with Ryan. I decided it was time to test a theory. That evening, I left my laptop running with the monitoring software active and stepped out for a short walk, blending into the neighborhood without drawing attention. When I returned, I found the latest log entry waiting. A fresh, encrypted message that had arrived just after 2 a.m. The pattern was consistent, almost ritualistic. I felt a mix of resolve and dread as I opened the file. The message contained a set of coordinates and a time, unmistakably pointing to a physical location for a drop-off. The precision of it all left me no doubt. Lucy had been deeply involved in this secret exchange. That night, I stayed up longer than usual, not out of insomnia but out of the need to document every detail. I printed out the logs, saved the encrypted files on multiple drives, and even took screenshots of the ongoing alerts. Every bit of evidence was archived, a silent testament to a betrayal that was unfolding with clinical precision. I didn't confront Lucy. I wasn't ready to shatter the fragile veneer of our everyday life until I was sure of the truth. In the quiet hours before dawn, as the rain finally subsided, I sat in the study surrounded by printouts and digital logs. The room was filled with the soft hum of the computer and the distant ticking of the wall clock. I stared at the chain of data, the invisible threads connecting our home, the dark net, and a woman I had loved and trusted. It was a network of secrets that spanned both virtual and physical worlds, and it was all converging on one inevitable conclusion. Every piece of evidence was a cold reminder that nothing was as it seemed. The efficiency with which Lucy had managed this double life was both astonishing and deeply unsettling. She had built a bridge between our normal, mundane existence and a realm of high-stakes cyber operations. A realm where every move was calculated and every interaction was cloaked in secrecy. I closed my eyes for a moment, not to process the emotional weight of what I had uncovered, but to refocus on the facts. The logs, the encrypted messages, the precise timing of every data spike. They were all indisputable. I now faced a choice: continue gathering evidence or confront Lucy directly. The data had given me clarity, and with that clarity came a need to address the situation head-on. As dawn broke and the first light of morning crept into the study, I saved the final log of the night's activity and powered down the computer. I had the evidence I needed, carefully preserved and ready to confront the reality that was unfolding. The next steps would be crucial. The truth was no longer hidden behind layers of encrypted files and anonymous IP addresses. It was laid bare in the cold, hard language of data. I woke to a heavy, oppressive silence that hung over the house like a storm cloud. The evidence I had gathered lay organized on my desk. Printed logs, encrypted files, and a timeline that painted an unmistakable picture of betrayal. Today was the day I would confront Lucy and force the truth into the open. No more shadows, no more whispered exchanges over secure channels. Before dawn, I backed up every piece of evidence onto a secure drive and locked it away in the safe. With a clear plan in mind, I moved slowly through the still house. In the early morning gloom, I made my way to the living room where Lucy sat reading the newspaper, her face calm, as if she were simply enjoying another routine morning. I could see the reflection of the rising sun in her eyes, but I noticed nothing out of place. Yet, every cell in my body was tuned to the secret that had been growing in our home. "Lucy," I said, my voice steady, "we need to talk." Her eyes lifted from the paper, and for a moment, the quiet confidence she usually exuded faltered. I didn't give her time to gather excuses or deflect. I pulled out the stack of logs and files, placing them on the coffee table. "I've been monitoring our network for weeks now. I have records of data transfers, encrypted messages, and multiple references to a user named Darknet Ryan. They all point to meetings, covert transactions, and Lucy, you've been in contact with someone from the Darknet." Lucy's hand trembled slightly as it gripped the edge of the table. The room fell silent, broken only by the distant hum of the refrigerator. Instead of denying, she exhaled slowly. "Ben, I didn't want you to find out this way," she admitted, her tone measured, void of overt emotion. I slid the printed logs toward her. "Explain this," I demanded, pointing to the timestamps that lined up with times you claimed you were asleep. Every anomaly, every encrypted file. What was all of this about? For a long, heart-stopping minute, Lucy's eyes were fixed on the documents. Then she stood, moving to the window, looking out as if searching for an escape. "I met Ryan because of work," she said. "He's a cybersecurity expert. I needed his help with a project. something that required discretion. I never thought it would go this far. I shook my head slowly, my pulse steady despite the storm raging inside. It wasn't just help, Lucy. You've been arranging secret meetings, transferring data. You scheduled secure drops at locations I know nothing about. Who is Ryan? Really? Her voice was low. Ryan isn't just a friend. He's part of a group that handles sensitive information that could expose corruption and wrongdoing on a large scale. I didn't involve you because it was dangerous. I wanted to protect us. I stared at her, the evidence laid bare between us. Then why hide it? Why lie about it? We're partners, Lucy. You could have trusted me enough to tell me the truth. Lucy's silence was heavier than any argument. After a few moments, she returned to the table. I tried to handle it on my own, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I wanted to fix things without tearing our lives apart. But it got out of hand. I leaned forward, the room's tension almost tangible. Fix things how? By betraying me with a hacker from the dark net? You risked everything we've built. The air thickened with the weight of her choices. Outside, the first real light of day broke through, but nothing about this confrontation was brightening. Lucy's eyes, usually so warm and inviting, were now guarded, hardened by the knowledge of what she had done. I never intended to hurt you, she said quietly. I was just trying to do what I thought was right. I looked down at the secure drive in my hand, a silent witness to the treachery. Do you really think I won't feel betrayed? That I won't be hurt knowing you've been living a double life? My voice was calm, almost clinical, as I recounted every logged activity, every encrypted message. This isn't about your reasons or the noble cause you claim. It's about the fact that I was kept in the dark while you were involved in dangerous operations. Lucy's face betrayed a brief flash of regret before she resumed her stoic demeanor. I was trying to make a difference, she repeated, a note of desperation in her tone. I thought that if I could expose the corruption behind closed doors, we could build a better future. I put the drive back on the table, my resolve hardening. And what about us? What happens now that everything is out in the open? I wasn't asking for justification. I was stating the inevitable consequence. You've put both our lives at risk. I trusted you, Lucy. There was a long pause as she absorbed my words. The silence that followed was filled with the hum of the cooling system and the distant sounds of morning traffic. Finally, Lucy spoke, her voice measured. I understand if you can't forgive me, Ben. I know this isn't a small mistake. It's a choice that cuts deep. I gathered the logs, the printed emails, the screenshots, each a testament to the secret world that had intruded on our marriage. I need time to process this, I said, my tone steady. I need to figure out what this means for us, for our future. I can't just ignore what's happened. Lucy nodded slowly, tears welling in her eyes but not falling. I'll give you that. I never wanted to hurt you, and I'm prepared to face whatever consequences come from this. I turned away for a moment, closing my eyes as I tried to let the reality settle. The betrayal wasn't a moment of rage or passion, it was a cold, calculated series of events meticulously planned and executed with the precision of a hacker's keystrokes. It wasn't about love lost or infidelity in the conventional sense, it was about secrets, lies, and a dangerous game that had spilled over into every corner of our life. The confrontation ended not with shouts or dramatic accusations, but with a heavy, unspoken agreement that nothing could go back to the way it was. I sat back down at the table, the evidence between us like a chasm that would be hard to bridge. I'm going to take the drive to a trusted colleague, I said. I need a professional opinion on just how deep this goes. And then we'll decide what to do next. Lucy reached out as if to stop me, but I gently pulled my hand away. Don't, I said. I need to understand the full extent of this. I need to know every secret that has been hidden from me. Her eyes glistened with something that might have been remorse or resignation, I couldn't tell which. The next few hours passed in a blur of phone calls and hushed consultations with the network security expert. The more I learned, the more I realized how intricately Lucy had woven herself into this dangerous world. The evidence confirmed that her actions were not random missteps but a deliberate engagement with a network that operated in the shadows of the internet, a network that had clear ties to high-stakes data leaks and covert transactions. When the morning was over, I returned to an empty kitchen. Lucy had left a note on the table, written in neat, deliberate handwriting. "I'm sorry. I had to do it. Lucy." There was no further explanation, no plea for forgiveness. Just a quiet acknowledgement of the choices made. Standing alone in the silence of our now divided home, I felt the full weight of the reckoning. The truth was out, the betrayal undeniable, and the path forward uncertain. I knew that every day from now on would be about navigating the consequences of secrets and lies. The digital evidence was clear, and with it came a promise that nothing in our life would ever be the same again. And that's the end of today's story. If you enjoyed this journey, please give this video a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more incredible stories like this one. Got thoughts or experiences you'd like to share? Drop them in the comments, I'd love to hear from you. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.